In this episode of Via VHS, we're looking back at Ron Howard's 1995 masterpiece, Apollo 13.
This is Via VHS.
Apollo 13, we go for launch.
Apollo 13 is the #1 movie in America.
Houston, we have a problem.
Time magazine calls it one hell of a ride.
The ship's bleeding to death.
A triumph.
We're not going to have enough power left to get home.
Exciting and moving, says Newsweek.
Something broke on your daddy's spaceship.
The best movie of 1995. Tom Hanks. Apollo 13. Rated PG. Now
Starts Friday at theaters everywhere.
So this is one of those rare occasions where true life events gives you everything you need for a summer blockbuster. There's no need to punch up the story or, take creative license to add dramatic effect or anything crazy like that. Everything you need from this story to make it a certifiable summer blockbuster is already there. This, of course, is the story of the Apollo 13 disaster. Basically, 3 astronauts are on the way to the moon. Catastrophe happens. There's an explosion outside the ship. And ultimately, they end up having to float around the moon and back to Earth in a toaster. It's absolutely incredible. And honestly, as technology continues to advance, the story becomes even more incredible because these spaceships had, a fraction of the computing power that our smartphones have. So they barely had anything to go on to begin with. And then when this catastrophe happens, they lose almost everything. Anything that could have went wrong. After the explosion, they first start losing oxygen, which, is really important, obviously. Then they have to enter complex math equations into the guidance computer in a very small time frame, or else they'll just float off into the oblivion of space. Then there's a carbon dioxide problem. Then they have to shut off all the electricity, and they start freezing to death. Somebody gets chlamydia. Everything that could have went wrong. It's absolutely incredible that this story took place, that these astronauts, spoiler alert, survived this mission. And it was just one of those stories that was begging for a feature-length film. So in 1994, Jim Lovell, who was the head astronaut on the Apollo 13 mission, portrayed in the film by Tom Hanks, of course, he wrote the book Lost Moon. And basically, Lost Moon chronicled the events of Apollo 13 in great detail and kind of gave a timeline for events and also gave a little bit of insight into what was going on in the hearts and minds of the astronauts on board Apollo 13, the folks down in Mission Control, and really put into perspective how amazing this story was. So, given that the 25th anniversary of Apollo 13 was the next year, 1995, and this book was released, it seemed like the right time to go ahead and make a movie of Apollo 13. However, as Hollywood has shown us time and time again, just because they have a good story doesn't mean they're going to make a good film with it. Hollywood has butchered countless great stories with terrible films. The list goes on. And this is not one of those films you want to screw up. I mean, the astronauts of Apollo 13, the folks down in Mission Control, they're American heroes. And you want to honor what they went through, honor the story of Apollo 13, the American space program, and really capture how incredible this story was. So apparently there was a bidding war for the film, and Universal got the rights. And, they really got an A-list group of people to bring this film to life. The person with the unenviable task of directing this film is Ron Howard.
Yeah, it was frustrating. It was very frustrating.
Initially, you might think this would be an easy film to direct because a great story is handed to you on a silver platter. But honestly, there's a lot of things going against you with this film. One, a lot of the audience knows the outcome of the story. Spoiler alert, the astronauts make it home safe. So you would think it'd be pretty difficult to create suspense, to have the audience on the edge of their seat, because at the end of the day, they know everything's going to be okay. The astronauts make it home just fine. So, that's going to take, some finesse to really build the suspense in the story. One of the other things that's going against you when making this film, but in my opinion, turned out to be one of the greatest aspects of this film, is that The protagonists don't win. The astronauts on board Apollo 13 on their way to the moon are trying to achieve a lifelong dream, and they come up short. They don't make it to the moon. So you would think that would be something that's going against you, but a lot of people have praised this element of the story, that it features, the heroes don't win. They don't achieve their lifelong dreams. And I think that's something that makes this movie kind of special. So fortunately, Ron Howard also had an A-list cast to go along with this amazing story. As I mentioned before, Tom Hanks, the lead in this film, he plays Jim Lovell, the head astronaut of Apollo 13. This is peak Tom Hanks. I mean, he's on that roll. 1992, I would say, to the early 2000s. Tom Hanks couldn't miss. I mean, so many great movies. I mean, League of Their Own, Sleepless in Seattle, Philadelphia, Forrest Gump the year before this. List goes on and on. Castaway later on. Tom Hanks was at the top of the world, and this might be my favorite. This might be my favorite Tom Hanks movie. I'll have to think about that. But as far as his performance, it's very good. There's not as much for him to chew on with this character as some of his other characters, because the story kind of overshadows the characters. But Tom Hanks is an Apollo aficionado who really, really cares about the space program. So he obviously cared a lot about this film, and he later went on to produce From the Earth to the Moon, which was the miniseries on HBO about the Apollo missions. He did that with Ron Howard. So Tom Hanks really, really cared about this role. The Lovell family said that he did a great job portraying Jim Lovell. So all in all, this is another great performance by Tom Hanks. The other three astronauts in this film, you have Bill Paxton playing Fred Hayes. He's sort of the country boy of the group. Kevin Bacon plays Jack Swigert. He's sort of the playboy of the group. And then you have Ken Mattingly, who's the stay boy. I'm sorry, that's a bad joke. Ken Mattingly basically didn't get to go on the mission. He was supposed to be on Apollo 13, but the doctor was an idiot and said he had the measles, but he didn't have the measles. All these guys doing a great job with this film. With these characters, that's where some of the creative license happened with this film, some of the minor changes to the story. But I don't really have much of a problem with it. Kevin Bacon and Bill Paxton have a little bit of a spat with their characters on board Apollo 13. They get into a little bit of an argument. Apparently that didn't happen, but I think it really portrayed how anxious and tense these astronauts were on board, and they needed a way to do that. So I don't really have a problem with them adding that into the film. I'm certain that maybe some of these thoughts went through these astronauts' minds privately about, maybe Swigert causing the situation that led them to be in this, disaster. But that apparently never really happened, but they put it into the movie. I think it worked out. In the film, Gary Sinise's character, Ken Mattingly, who was left on Earth, ends up being incredibly vital to bringing these astronauts home. He spends a lot of time in the simulator. He helps with the amps issues, because later on they have to figure out how to get the amps just right, or they won't be able to power back on the spacecraft. He really did help with those things, Ken Mattingly, but the character in the story is actually a composite of several different astronauts who are all helping to bring these other astronauts home. So I understand why they did that as well. It kind of consolidates everything, streamlines the story, but it does kind of suck because you want to see everybody who was involved get their due diligence. There were two other great performances in this film, both nominated for Academy Awards, one for Best Supporting Actress and one for Best Supporting Actor. Kathleen Quinlan plays Marilyn Lovell, the wife of Jim Lovell. She's kind of the representative of what's going on with the families on Earth and how grueling this had to be to their emotions, their psyche, how hopeless they must have felt. She does an incredible job at this film, gets an Academy Award nomination, but the person who steals the show absolutely knocks it out of the park. My favorite character in the film, favorite performance of the film, goes to Ed Harris, who's playing Gene Kranz. Gene Kranz was the head of mission control at NASA during the Apollo 13 disaster, and he has a famous line in this film, Ed Harris does, failure is not an option. I think that was like the tagline of the film. Apparently that was never actually said, but that was the attitude of everybody at NASA during this disaster. We're bringing these guys home no matter what, come hell or high water. And Gene Kranz's character was kind of the embodiment of that in the film. Ed Harris is awesome. He's so motivating. He makes you just want to get off your couch and like help build something to get these astronauts home. At one point, they have to literally fit a square peg in a round hole, and he's just like, guys, do it. We got to bring these guys home. And failure really isn't an option for him. One of my favorite moments of the film is in Mission Control as the astronauts are getting ready to make their descent back to Earth. And two employees at NASA were talking about how bad the optics of this would be if the astronauts don't survive, if they don't make it home, how devastating it could be for the space program. And Gene Kranz turns around and says to these guys, with all due respect, I believe this is going to be our finest hour. Great quote. But it's even more incredible that when you think about it, 8 months before this or so, they literally landed humans on the moon for the first time. So to say this is going to be NASA's finest hour is a huge statement. But in a way, it's true, because while this may have not been the achievement of Apollo 11, landing Neil Armstrong on the moon for the first time, the things that the folks at NASA had to do under pressure, under incredible stress, with limited options, the ingenuity, the fortitude, it's absolutely incredible. And Gene Kranz kind of delivers that. Ed Harris delivers that through Gene Kranz in this film. In my opinion, Ron Howard absolutely kills it with this movie. This is probably Ron Howard's best film. This is one of the best films of the 90s, in my opinion. It's absolutely great. One of the things that makes this film work so well is its authenticity. Ron Howard really brings you into the situation. It's very visceral. And it's all the little things. Obviously, the costumes, the music that's used, things like that. But he really just brings you into the situation, and that allows him to keep the intensity up and keep you on the edge of your seat despite knowing what happens with these astronauts. That's the beauty of this film. Every time I watch it, I'm on the edge of my seat. I'm in suspense, even though I know these astronauts are going to make it home safe. Another great thing that Ron Howard does is, anytime you're dealing with space and you're dealing with astronauts and you're dealing with complex scientific issues, most of us aren't intelligent enough to be astronauts, okay? Most of us aren't intelligent enough to work at NASA. So you kind of got to dumb things down for the layman. And usually that involves a lot of exposition, and that is in the film. But Ron Howard finds creative ways to explain things without slowing the film down and killing the momentum. That's one of the best parts of this film, in my opinion. He uses archival news footage where they're kind of explaining to the viewers at home what's going on with the astronauts in space. I think it's archival news footage. If he recreated it, it's even more impressive. I don't think he did, though. But that's done very well at this film. And it's, the situation, the way they dealt with it in space was very linear. They went one problem at a time, unless one of the other problems became more of a priority, and then they switched things around. But the film is shot that way, too. It explains everything in order of how things were done. So now we're dealing with the oxygen. Now we're dealing with the amps. Now we're dealing with the CO2. Little by little, everything is explained to you in this film, and it doesn't lose its momentum at all. I was 10 going on 11 years old when this film was released, and I remember being really, really excited for it. The film's rated PG, so I was definitely able to watch it. I probably would have been able to see it if it was PG-13 anyway, but I was really, really excited for Apollo 13, and one of the reasons I was so excited is because of one of the weird marketing aspects of this film. This film was released on June 30th, 1995, a few days before 4th of July. And that does make sense because this is a very inspiring, patriotic film. But usually when you have a film that is, a true story, very dramatic, great cast, great director, you're thinking Oscars, and this film was nominated for 9. So usually you put that film closer to the Oscars. This is more of a holiday blockbuster. You get families, shopping at Christmas time. The film was rated PG. You bring them in. But this film was released in the summer, and that led to some weird marketing opportunities.
The Apollo 13 movie, American Heroes, and we're bringing them back.
Hello, Hearties. We are hungry. Over.
Roger, Apollo. Recommend 3 Apollo combos. Over.
Roger.
2 juicy beef patties, cheese and special sauce with booster-sized fries and Coke, just $2.99. Hardee's Apollo Combo.
We are go for lunch.
The biggest combo for the money on the planet.
Think they'll be back?
The taste always brings them back. Fresh from the kitchen at Hardee's, over.
Collect all 20 Apollo 13 Pog milk caps and Moon Slammer, just 99 cents with any Hardee's combo.
Hardee's is a fast food chain that's really prevalent here in North and South Carolina. It's owned by Carl's Jr. now, so it's a very different place. It's not nearly as popular as it once was, but Hardee's used to be a big deal here in the Southeast. And I was so excited when they had this Apollo 13 combo deal and the Pogs. They had Pogs because 90s, and it was awesome. I had the Moon Slammer. I think mine was blue. It was like a metallic blue, and it was dope, and I loved it. But nothing says America like a fast food chain capitalizing off a big summer blockbuster that capitalizes off of a near fatal space disaster. At the end of the day, the marketing must have worked, though, because this film was a huge hit, financially, critically, nominated for 9 Oscars, as I said, still loved to this day. There's very little I could find wrong with Apollo 13. If I did have, a small complaint, it would just be that, they had to consolidate some characters, but I get why they did it. To streamline the film, it makes sense. But there's really no legitimate complaints I have about Apollo 13. My final score for Apollo 13 is 9.3. Now, that's the highest score I've given yet, even higher than Gladiator, which is one of my top 5 favorite films of all time. The reason it's higher than Gladiator is because even though I love Gladiator a little bit more, the flaws in Gladiator are very obvious, but this is really hard to find flaws without nitpicking, and they're few and far between. So if you've never seen Apollo 13, you need to get on that. It's awesome. Like I said, one of the best films of the 90s, in my opinion. Still holds up incredibly well. So I know they have a 4K release, so if you want to watch it 4K, do that. If you want to watch it on VHS, you could do that as well. That is my review for Apollo 13. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Let me know if you love Apollo 13. Let me know if I missed something really important that I should have talked about. Let me know if you're a moon landing denier. And if you are, we have beef. But to each his own, believe what you want to believe. But watch Apollo 13 either way. So if you like this review and you want to see more, definitely like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. I'm trying to get out 4 videos a week for the foreseeable future to try to populate this channel and get a lot of new stuff out. A wide variety of films I'm looking at right now. So stay tuned for that. Also, new podcast coming up here in the next few weeks to a month or so. It's called the Via VHS Nostalgia Cast. In this podcast, we talk movies a little bit, but I'm kind of going beyond that to talk about other nostalgic pop culture elements. So I'll be talking about television, music, news events from the 80s, 90s, a little bit the 70s. So stay tuned for that as well. I'm really, really excited about it. Anyway, that's all I have for Apollo 13. Thanks for listening, and Via VHS is out.